Okay, hello everyone. I hope you're all doing well. Okay, so we know that the JOptionPane's showInputDialog method always returns a string, always returns whatever the user has typed. We basically convert it to a string. And we saw in the last video how to convert that string to an integer using one of the methods in Java's wrapper classes, which we will talk about in the future, right? The wrapper class, which we'll talk about in the future. We saw how we could use one of the methods in Java's wrapper classes to convert that string that's returned back from the JOptionPane's showInputDialog method. Now there are other methods for converting, say, that string to a double, to a float, to a byte, and basically to other data types or data values. And we're going to see them in this video. Okay, so I'm going to display or basically type them in a comment here so we can see them first. But we know that, for good practice, we know anytime we are using the JOptionPane, we need to go ahead and import it, right? So I'm going to import javax.swing.JOptionPane. We are importing the JOptionPane class located in the javax.swing package in the Java API. All right, so I'm going to use a multi-line comment to do that. I like to do it this way, and then I'll separate it this way. All right, so the first one is we saw how we would convert the string to an integer, for example. So we used integer.parseInt this way, and we know that integer.parseInt takes in whatever you want to pass basically to an integer or as an integer, and then it returns that string, okay, as an integer. We know how it works. So before we basically create another example, let's look at the other methods in Java's wrapper classes. So let me just do this here. Wrapper classes. We will talk about those in the future. We'll cover in the future. Okay, my typing is not good. Okay, so there's integer.parseInt, right? Let's just organize it properly. Let's start with byte. Okay, so you can convert that string that the user or that string that the JOptionPane showInputDialog method returns to an integer. You can convert it also to a byte. So it's going to be the same format, byte.parseInt. It takes in that string that the JOptionPane showInputDialog method returns. Okay, and then it converts it to a byte, right? Okay, so there's byte.parseInt, there's short.parseShort right here, short.parseShort. All right, now there's integer.parseInt. We saw that, and then there is long.parseLong if you wanted something converted to a long. There's float.parseFloat, and then there is double.parseDouble. All right, so in the last video we saw an example, right? So let's just underline this. We saw an example of how we would use the integer.parseInt, the parseInt method, okay, to take in, all right, the string that's returned from the JOptionPane's showInputDialog method and then convert it to an integer. We saw how to do that, right? So let's pick another of these methods and just for an example, so we can get used to it. So double.parseDouble. Let's do that, right? All right, so let's go all the way down here, or even below it. Let's go below it so it's not too confusing. So assuming we wanted to ask the user to type in how much they make in a year, all right? Or no, let's keep it simple. How much they make an hour anytime they work, right? So we know we're going to be using a JOptionPane, so we import the JOptionPane class. Now let's display to the user using the JOptionPane's showInputDialog. Let's display to the user a label like a question, and then allow the user to type in the value, right? So let's do that. With the JOptionPane, we don't have to create an object. We can just directly use the methods located in the JOptionPane class. So we use JOptionPane the dot operator or the access operator to access the methods in the JOptionPane class. And one of the methods is showInputDialog method. showInputDialog. We've seen this in the past. It takes in an argument, and then the argument is basically the label or the prompt that's going to be displayed on that dialog box. So what we want to ask the user is, please enter how much you make an hour, every hour, how much you make every hour. Sorry, my typing is not good. Right, now we know the JOptionPane's showInputDialog method is going to pop up a dialog box with a text box embedded in there. It's going to display this message, please enter how much you make every hour. And it's going to allow the user to type in a value. Now the user is going to type in a value. Whatever value the user is going to type is going to be returned. It's going to be sent back as a string. Now we know methods send back. Some methods send back information when they're done doing what they do. We'll talk more about methods in the future. So it returns whatever the user types. All right, and we need a place to store it. If it's sending back whatever the user has typed, we need a place to store it. Remember I said that the JOptionPane's showInputDialog method always returns a string. So if it always returns a string, then we need a place to store it. We need a string variable to hold the value that's being returned. Right, so let's go ahead and create a string variable, or it's basically an object, right? It's going to store an object, but we create a string reference variable to store that object. So let's call this user wage, okay, or user hourly wage. All right, so user hourly wage now is going to store whatever the user has typed. Okay, that hourly wage. It's going to be a number, right? But we know the JOptionPane showInputDialog method always returns a string, and that's why we've created this user hourly wage as a string, right? As a matter of fact, let's not call this user hourly wage first. Let's call it a different variable, right? Let's call the actual wage after we've converted a string to a number. Let's call that actual wage user hourly wage. You get what I'm trying to say. Let's change this variable name to user string input, or user input string, just to say that, okay, this is the string that the user typed initially, because we know, sorry, my typing was bad. We know that the showInputDialog method always returns a string. All right, so it's going to store whatever value the user has typed, converted to a string. It's going to store it here. And we know that we need this value as a number because it's a wage. It's going to be either $2.50 or $10.25 or $25.12. It's going to be any of those values, right? Or it could be even 5.00, right? So we need this number converted to a double, right? Because it can be a double. It can be 2.5, right? And so we know, first of all, this is a string. We don't need it as a string because we can perform calculations with it if we wanted it as a number, or if we wanted to do basically perform calculations with it. So we need to convert this to a double, and this is where we use one of the methods in Java's wrapper classes, right, which we will cover in the future. In the last video, we saw how to use integer.parseInt. Let's just see another variation of how to use double.parseDouble to do that. So double.parseDouble. We want to pass something as a double. We want to kind of convert something as a double. And what are we converting as a double? That's what we pass into these two parentheses, okay, as an argument. Methods accept arguments. Some of them accept arguments, not all of them, but some methods accept arguments. And the argument we're going to pass in here is what we want to pass, okay, as a double. We want to pass what's stored in here in user input string, the value that the user typed. That number, which is stored as a string, we want to pass it in here as an argument, user input string. And once you pass user input string into the double.parseDouble, it's going to pass that as a double. It's going to kind of convert whatever is stored in user input string as a double and return it. Once it's done, it's going to return it. And so when it's returning it back, when it's sending it back to us, we need a place to store it. And so now I'm going to go ahead and create a variable. Since it's returning a double, since it converted what's the string that was stored in user input string to a double, we need a double variable to hold that double variable, so that double value that's being returned. So I'm going to go ahead and create a double variable, and now I'm going to call it user hourly wage, right? See, that's why I changed the name. Okay, just wanted to keep these different. So now user hourly wage is going to be actually the number hourly wage, okay, not the one stored as a string, the one that has been converted to a double. So when it's done converting it to a double, it returns it. So I need a place to store it, which I've created a variable here, user hourly wage. So user hourly wage now is going to store the double version of what was stored in user input string. And then now we can go ahead and display it if we want. We can use the JOptionPane's show message dialog. Okay, JOptionPane dot the access operator, the dot operator, or the access operator to access the methods in the JOptionPane class. So the method is show message dialog. Okay, so I'm going to pass in the argument now, which is going to center that dialog box on the screen for us, and then what I want to display on the dialog box. In this case, I want it to be user hourly wage. So I'm going to concatenate it with a string sort of and say user get paid, and then I'm going to concatenate it with the value user hourly wage. Okay, and then I'm going to concatenate it with another string and say per hour. Full stop. All right, so we're done. But then we know anytime we use the JOptionPane, we have to call at the end of the program. Now this is a comment, okay? So this is not part of the program. It's just like notes, right? So at the end of my program, in my main method, I need to call system.exit. Remember that we talked about it, which is going to terminate that extra thread or that extra task, which is called a thread, started by the JOptionPane, so we can properly end or terminate a program. I'm going to pass in 0. This number 0 is going to be passed back to the operating system, and when the operating system sees that this number 0 was passed, it's normally an indication that this program ran well, was able to run with no errors, get to this point, and passing 0 to the operating system. When the operating system sees that 0, it's normally an indication that the program ran successfully. All right, so now let's run this and see if we have any errors. Compile this and see if we have any errors. So compile, and there are no errors. Let's run it. It's going to open up. Please enter how much you make every year. I'm going to type in 6.79, right? And then hit OK, and it says user gets paid 6.79 per hour. There's no $sign. We'll talk about how to really format a number so it can basically display as a monetary value. So don't worry about it for now, but basically this is the proof that we can convert that string, right, that the user has typed over here. All right, we can convert it to a number and work with it. If we can add values to add numbers to it if we want. So this is how to use. This is another example of how to use Java's wrapper classes to convert that string that's always returned from the by the JOptionPane's showInputDialog to numbers, right? Okay, so if you have any questions, we'll see more of this, so don't worry. If you have any questions, please comment down below, and I'll do everything to respond to them. Thank you very much for watching. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time with the next video. All right then, bye-bye.